Boa noite, boa noite, boa noite, boa noite, buenas noches, or good evening. This is AACE Brazil section in a new edition of our AACE Connection. This program happens once a month, and we invite practitioners from all over the world to bring us best practices, case studies, and to tell us the trends in cost engineering. And this month, I am very proud to introduce you to a big friend of AACE Brazil section, our former AACE president, Martin Darley, who has been with us here in Brazil twice in annual meetings and is always helping us develop our community with the good skills of cost engineering. And I would like to introduce our international director. Brazil section is the only section of ACE that has an international director. And our international director, Felipe Gutierrez, is in Texas. And Martin, although he is from UK, is in Texas too. Martin, welcome.
Thanks, Aldo. Thank you very much. So with that, I'll plan to talk about some of the challenges facing cost engineering in the oil and gas industry. I don't know if we're going to have a little conversation first, Aldo, about our history with AACE, or I can kick in here with my agenda for this evening. But the idea is to generate some discussion with the audience and yourselves. So we'd like to talk a little bit about AACE first.
Oh, yes. Martin, I would like to make an initial question. Right. While people are still a more general question. What value? You are not only a member, you have been director, president, and you are an active practitioner of cost engineering and very active within AACE. What's the value of being a member of AACE?
A good question, Aldo. Many aspects at AACE, has impacted my life, improved my life. So as you talked, I'm from the UK and was involved with Aace, is an association under the umbrella of ISEC that you're very familiar with. Came to the US, and AACE was a big organization here. I got involved with them, very local in Houston, and it helped establish a connection and network. Friends who helped me get recognized in the community. And from that, I worked with Turner and Townsend at the time, and there was only 3 of us in the office back then, and now there's 414 offices in the US. So it helped promote through the conferences, through the networks, through presentations like this, and just the skills of cost engineering. It helped me develop those. I became certified cost professional CCP, big recognition, not only in the US, but elsewhere globally. And I moved on to Chevron just over about 12 years ago. And Chevron adopted AACE's total cost management framework. Part of the visits I did to Brazil and other places around the world were to talk about Chevron and our journey in cost engineering and how it helped us develop projects and successful projects around the world. And it helped develop my career as well as the cost engineers within Chevron. So, being involved with this Aace was by accident. I think all of us do that. You get involved with a section, and the next thing you know, someone like Valerie Venters has you volunteering to be an officer, and then you get elected as a regional director, and so on and so on. And I was very fortunate to be president back in 2014 and 15. Back then, we were able to travel a little more freely than we are right now, and so I was able to meet cost engineers around the world. So I guess for me, it's been a big part of my life for a long time. There's a lot of value in it, a lot of friendship, but I learned a lot. My skills are better. My knowledge is much better. I've brought that to Chevron. I've brought that to the contractors we work with, and I think it's just a big community that you can be part of, get tremendous value. I know statistically you earn a little bit more, this, that, and the other, but that's secondary. It's the huge sense of community, belonging, and developing a peer group and a bit of competition, with me, you, Aldo. We go around the world and whose presentation is better, who gets the most likes, there's a bit of fun involved with it. And I think that is a major part why I keep coming back. It's fun. This evening, I'm looking forward to hearing from our colleagues again in Brazil. I haven't been there for a couple of years. Sao Paulo, the last time I was down there. And I really enjoyed the country and the people down there and the cost engineers and what you do in Brazil.
Right. Martin, I think you can start by sharing your screen and you.
Yeah. Are you seeing my screen, Aldo? Is someone seeing it?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have to put it in the presentation mode.
You got it?
I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. So, as I talked about, I'm going to talk about the challenges.
Yes, go ahead. I will turn off my camera, and it's with you and Felipe. Felipe will be the host, and Martin, well, start us off.
Okay. Ciao. So.
Just quickly, Martin. Sorry to interrupt. Again, I also turn off my video, but I'll be here hearing you. So if you need anything, and if I get any questions in the meanwhile of your presentation, I'll just jump in. Okay, that's the idea a little bit, so to make it informal.
Questions, just jump in, Felipe. I prefer that as we go.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to talk very personal perspective on the challenges facing cost engineering in the oil and gas industry. And I'll touch on some of the trends I'm seeing in the industry. I've got a presentation here. I'll share it with the section afterwards. It's all public domain. So this is my opinions. It's not the opinions of Chevron or Aace. It's my view of the world, and hopefully it helps stimulate some Q&A and some discussion. But a little bit first about the agenda. I'll talk about my own biography, very, very brief slide. Talk about the changing landscape, industry performance. There's 8 trends specifically that I want to touch on, and I'll wrap up with some concluding remarks, and we'll take questions as we go through. So, as we touched on, what you do know about me is I was president of Aace. I served on 9 different boards. I'm a fellow of the Aace and also the RICS that you may well know in Brazil. I work for Chevron in their capital projects as an advisor. But what you don't know about me, and less so, is I'm certified in value management. I've got a diploma in Europe on quality management. The ICMS coalition, I was vice chair of that for 4 years. I've contributed to ISO standards in the oil and gas, co-authored a handbook for small projects when part of the ECI, European Construction Institute, as The one thing I am missing is being down in Brazil with you, and as you see, myself and Aldo, the last time we were together, I believe that's in Sao Paulo. So fortunately, can't be there, but we'll do our best. And there's a little disclaimer at the bottom of the slide that this is all public domain. It's my interpretation of what's in that information, and I encourage you to have a dialogue. So what's driving the changing landscape? There's much talk of renewables. You can see in the upper left quadrant there, forecasts of how much the renewables will be by company, and these are the major IOCs within the globe, and you can see, Shell and BP are featured there, and Total. So clearly a growth in renewables in our portfolios. In the bottom left, it's the demand for fossil fuels, our traditional hydrocarbons, oil and gas, which gas is always expressed in oil equivalent. And you can see with COVID, the severe dip in demand and the bounce back. But what you're seeing with the bounce back is it's going back to probably where it was, but it's not getting significantly higher. And that's one of the forecasts you'll see consistent from the US Energy Administration there. In our top right, we're seeing some of the strategies that the various oil companies are adopting in terms of lowering carbon and our carbon footprint, how much carbon we produce as part of our operations, etc. And the strategies are all over the radar. Everyone's got a different view and opinion, and we all know we need to do something. With Chevron, who I work for, you can Google it. We make public statements, New York Stock Exchange every quarter. BP's published its information. Companies like Total have done likewise, and Shell more recently very public about their statements of when they would lower carbon and their targets, etc. But what's driving some of that is competition for capital, for funds, for investment. You can see there was a picture of a drill rig, and the sun setting, very sort of symbolic about it. Demand for drill rigs at the moment and exploration is down significantly, and what the future holds is potentially uncertain. What the industry does need to do is in the bottom left, and that's to improve returns. And by that, we mean being competitive for our investors, our stakeholders, making dividends, providing shareholder value, and returns for the investment and the funds that are placed in our good hands. And again, you can see from the reds and the greens that how companies have performed in recent years, and all these statistics from these resources are available to peruse. But these are some of the drivers, key drivers behind what is the changing landscape for us. But what about industry performance? So there's a couple of charts here. Top left is from data from CII, Construction Industry Institute in the US, and it looks at the performance of projects relative to the cost and schedule targets set. So the sweet spot is our little square in the middle, and you can see, projects across the industry don't do very well at hitting that central target. Underspending, overspending, under schedule, over schedule, all of those four outcomes present problems. And so, the industry is trying to improve on not only predictability, but also on improved returns. So one of the drivers behind all of that is the poor productivity we see in construction, and that in turn affects oil and gas projects. And you can see the chart on the bottom right, where we can see manufacturing significant improvements in productivity. Agriculture has absolutely astronomical improvements. And the construction industry is actually going the wrong way. You can see productivity there is in decline. Despite all of the things we've done over the recent decades, we still see our productivity in decline. So what's that? How does that manifest itself in the industry? I'm seeing eight trends emerging over the last few years, and I'll talk to each of them. I've got a slide on each of them, but reduced cycle times, supplier-led solutions, a drive for more standardization, transparency. People want to see data on performance, and that's in the public domain as well. Data itself is enormously valuable, probably one of the most valuable commodities. It's only 20 years ago we had, 9/11 happened in the States. And at that time, iPhones, the internet were all very much in their infancy. How things have changed, they're trillion-dollar businesses now. A little touch on operational science, explain what that is and what it means for cost engineering. The emergence and the use of digital twin technology and digital in particular. And a fairly new one even for myself is what in the oil business, what does unmanned installations look like in the future? So cycle time, I think most people are going to be familiar with the stages of a project, from the initial scoping and planning to engineering, detailing, and the construction and startup and operation. And historically in the oil business and energy business, that front end piece takes exceptional amount of time, from discovering a resource to developing it, defining the opportunity, building the assets, installing them, can take up to a decade. 10 years is quite common for that, and that erodes tremendous amount of value. So that when we talk about reducing cycle time, a big focus on reducing that front end, and also in execution. And some of it ties with some of the other themes around standardization and supply solutions. We've tended to go for a bespoke solution to a problem. So that means everything we do is unique. And you do something unique, it's the first time and it takes a little time. So on the back end, the execution, that's where we can see some opportunity to reduce cycle time. And the big impact of reduced cycle time is the amount of time between the initial investment to the return on the investment is significantly reduced. Other ways of looking at this is also to do phase development, where there's an early concept is put in place and then subsequently expanded over a period of years. And again, you see a revenue stream much earlier in the overall cycle, and that helps improve economics for the project. So a couple of things on the supplier-led solution, and this is just illustration. There are many, many examples. I've picked two here. And part of it is the reason you'll see in another slide. I worked on an FPSO, and they're quite common in Brazil, floating production and storage and offloading assets, and usually found where there's no infrastructure. So you've got to build an asset that can take the oil from the basin, treat it, do some intermediate production, and then offload it to usually shuttle tankers that can take it away to market and refining. And what we're seeing in this space, instead of that solution that's very bespoke, many companies, and I've provided links here to SBM, but Mordec, Aker, and several others have the same approach, where basically buying an FPSO on a catalog basis. You decide how big you want the vessel, how much oil storage you need, what production capacity you need. And then all the various process modules, as you see on the diagram there, you pick them based on the production throughputs, the properties of the oil or the gas, etc. And instead of designing it to a specific capacity, you buy it in increments. You buy one or you buy two, instead of buying or building an exceptionally big power generation unit, for instance. So in doing that, you reduce the cycle time. You use a lot of variability in engineering. You can use design one, build many approach, and this offers significant savings. It also changes your execution strategies. It changes your delivery. It alters your supply chain. It's fundamental change in the way we look at developing opportunities. Along with that, there's been a lot of work to talk about standardization, and companies like my own have our own specifications, and we give those specifications to contractors, to vendors, to suppliers, and they have to take their product and modify it. That might be documentation or it might be physical modification, but we have our requirements through lots of experience. We've continued to add to those requirements, but those specifications, being unique and bespoke, drive cost. And what happened in the industry was this JIP, a joint industry project. You may have mentioned in my bio there, I worked on a JIP on whole life costing. That was in the 80s when the oil gas prices fell considerably, and there was a big drive to reduce costs. JIP 33 is around standard procurement specifications. And so the vision is that standard specifications across the globe will see benefit in terms of reduced costs, improved supply schedules. Sorry, do we have
Martin, just 1 second. Excuse me. JIP stands for what?
Joint Industry Project. So very quickly, a JIP is where the industry and the JIP 33, if you follow the link, it will name all of the contributors, give their time and effort free, and collaborate to provide a standard. A good example is the ICMS on the cost side with the International Construction Measurement Standard. That was all volunteer effort, self-funded. It's the same approach for the JIP. It's a joint project funded by the industry to take place in that. Okay. I can come back to that if there's more questions. Touching on ICMS, this is an infographic. Many associations, institutions, including ACE and RICS, are part of the ICMS. And it's around offering transparency and standardizing the way costs are presented and analyzed in the construction industry. The third edition is actually out. I think it closes this Friday, so not much time to contribute. But the third edition is now introduced in how to measure and describe lower carbon on a standard basis. So the industry has, been driven by the need for greater transparency, and this coalition came about to drive that. What does it mean for cost engineers? You have to be able to provide the information in that format. Our work breakdown structure, your code of accounts, needs to be mapped to this standard if there's a requirement to provide information to this standard. We're seeing it globally creeping in terms of requirements from various countries. The UK in particular is leading the charge. The US is a little behind, but the standardization and the adoption of it is coming into play also in some of the other areas with our cost engineering software providers have functionality now where you can adopt ICMS standards or map to it. Other companies are using that standard now to collate and analyze their own data because now it's a standard. When you look at that data internally and then you look at it externally, you're able to see where there's performance gaps, where there's opportunities to improve, where your costs don't look right, etc. So there's a lot in the standard there, and the infographic just talks about how this can offer potential to improve the performance of the industry. But it's another example of where the industry is getting together and collaborating to improve the performance of the industry. So all of these things touch on data, and data is a huge commodity, a very valuable commodity these days. BIM, building information modeling. I know if Aldo's still on the line, he's a big proponent of this. But you can visualize now, no longer is it a piece of paper with a drawing, a blueprint. You can take that information and you can see it in 5D. So you can not only walk through the model, but that information links to your cost database, links to your schedule, can link to supplier information, and all of the benefits from this is able to visualize now.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Aldo. Yes. Yeah, you're probably more of an expert on BIM than myself. I deal in the oil and gas world and HISIS models and things like that. So, but you get real-time information. You can faster decision making, greater collaboration. Particularly last 18 months, great when you can all see your design in a model that you're sharing and linking in with earlier discussion and points I made. Procurement becomes easier. You've got standardization in there, and you can manage the construction process in a virtual way as well. So BIM in itself is, and the 5D approach is just harnessing data. What we'll see in the slide I talked about in accelerating and reducing cycle time is the use of technology and data is improving cycle times as well. And it's not uncommon in the oil business, energy business, that we've actually cataloged all our assets now electronically, and so they're in a BIM model. So you can look at potential debottlenecking of an asset. You can look at cloning it and design one, build two. We're now doing that in some instances. And you can look at alternatives, configurations, constructability. I've seen bids in the last couple of years where instead of a PowerPoint, the bidders turn up with a BIM model and it shows how they're going to build it and what it looks like in real time. And it's very compelling as opposed to a PowerPoint. One of the things I've also seen coming along, and I'll do a plug, next week, Houston section, if you go on their website, ACE-HGCS, you'll see their first meeting of their new season kicks off next week. And it's a former colleague of mine, Rich Stack. He's talking about operational science and scheduling, and whether the two work together, compete, or there's an improvement in the industry. But what is operational science? So anyone who's seen a car manufacturing plant or any manufacturing, that's operational science in action. It's managing the work throughput with the capacity you have available to optimize that. And that's Little's law. And there's a link there to it in Wikipedia. There's a project production institute based out of California that has a lot of resources on what operational science means in the construction world, and how it can help improve productivity. And in Chevron, we've embedded operational science into our project delivery. And there's a lot of debate. Earned value management has unintended consequences where contractors earn work and value through the contract, as opposed to focusing on creating value for the client. So there's a lot of push, pull, and tension in adopting operational science within construction and EPC contracts. But we're finding great value. You can take workflows. If you're producing an engineering drawing, there's actually a workflow involved in that. And you map that workflow in using operational science, and then take that information into your construction, an EPC schedule, and then you've tied the two together. And the schedule, to me, has more meaning because it's driven by the workflow and the processes, as opposed to rules of credit, which is a sort of a more traditional way we've looked at it. So putting the two together is quite powerful. And I think as technology assists this, the analysis helps us, and the work packaging that you see from CII, all of these things come into play and work in tandem and pull the same way. You're going to see improvement in productivity. My personal experience over the years is, your craftsmen and your trades and your laborers and your workers on your construction site go there to do a great job. They have pride in their work. They want to make a good product. And there's nothing more frustrating than the likes of me coming along as a client and redirecting them and changing their mind and issuing change orders and other things, materials not arriving, or there's too much material and you have to double handle it and move it around. So these techniques and approaches just help you manage the work more efficiently, and out of that efficiency becomes better productivity, actually safer work environment, a happier work environment. So to me, it's a win-win, and there's a lot of opportunity in this space to bring operational science more into the EPC world that we operate in. Digital twin is very similar to the BIM, but this is where we have electronic copy, literally, of an asset in a control room, and it's operating out in the field, and the control room can see exactly what's going on and make changes and operate a facility remote. And this space has exploded in recent years. So one of the things, an example, if we had a problem, say, in an asset in Australia, our experts would have to get on an airplane, fly for 24 hours, get to Australia, decompress and get used to the time zone, look at the problem, come up with a solution, deal with Houston, then back to the operators, work on the solution, move forward, get back on a plane, go to Houston, and wait for the next problem. One of the things with the digital twin is we're able to look at the problem, work the solution digitally, and then implement it without leaving the office. And so, you're seeing just huge application of this digital technology. You see the visors, the helmets that engineers can wear. They can actually walk through the asset in this digital space. So it's taking, BIM and doing things with it. And what we're seeing in new technology is the artificial intelligence, the AI, where the initial design is then looked at, and artificial intelligence will rework the pipe runs, the cable routing, the placement of ducting, the position of equipment, all to optimize the design that manually would have taken significantly longer, if ever it ever been done. And you end up with a more optimized design, and then you go ahead and build it. And again, that reduces the cost, by doing so, you address some of those challenges I talked about at the beginning that are affecting the industry, and improved returns and reduced cycle times. And this one is really out there, but it's stuff we're working on. Okay, so in the top left, that is Rosebank, which is an FPSO destined for the west of Shetland. I worked on that project, and that design is circa 2018, and that was the design we had for the FPSO. You can see it's very substantial. It's a large vessel, a lot of equipment, a lot of topsides, and it was designed for that environment, for that particular reservoir, for that particular market. Very bespoke, a very individual design. Already, you're looking at the design in the middle, which I touched on with companies like SBM and Modec and Aace, where they've got a standard solution. And then there it is in the middle. You could go and basically buy an SBM or a supplier-led solution off the shelf. It's like buying a vehicle. You go and do you want a white one? Do you want a 2-liter engine? Do you want 4-wheel drive? And that's it. And you take it out the showroom, or maybe it's delivered in a few weeks or whatever. But what the future looks like is radically different. And there we have at the bottom right, what does an unmanned facility look like conceptually? And in theory, we've proven this could work. So when you take off the people, you strip out a lot of stuff. So you don't need an accommodation because there's no one there to go to sleep. There's no one there to go and eat. If you don't need to eat, you don't need storage for food. You don't need lighting and power for the living quarters. So you reduce your power consumption, which reduces down the size of your generation. If you actually did the generation from shore, you could run a cable, or you could run it from a wind farm that's just next door to you, as you see in the diagram. So then your generators disappear. So if you don't have your generators, you don't need the fuel, you don't need this, you don't need that. You take away the cranes because you don't have all this equipment that you're going to have to maintain and lift on and off the FPSO. And you know the systems that are associated with people being on a vessel are significant. You know, the quarters is one, the heli deck is one. There's a whole bunch of life support systems required. And once you move away from that, then the facility looks extremely different. In terms of operating it, you're going to use that digital twin technology. From a cost engineer point of view, what's it going to cost? Looks very different, right? So, so that's potentially the future, but that's just FPSO, one example, but it's been applied to numerous assets and facilities in the oil and gas business, and that's probably maybe 10 years away as potential solutions for the industry. Okay, just trying to get my screen to advance. There we go. So what does all these changes mean for the cost engineer? I mean, are the fundamentals still in play? Previously, if you selected the right project and you did it right, you got a good outcome. And then your top right there is the classic diagram. It's referred to as the eagle's beak. So in terms of creating value, if you do good definition, it improves the value. Good execution maintains that value. Poor execution would erode the value. Project definition, if it's not very good, good execution, yeah, okay, you get some value out of it. But if you execute it badly, then there's virtually no value in the project. And that's really been a lot of the fundamentals as we talked about it. but in terms of selecting the right project, there's more research to show that it's really around getting the business case, making sure that this very early phase of identifying the opportunity is strong. And the research is showing that if you get this value creation at the front end, this back end is less important. It's still important that you do the project to the best that you can, but in terms of what it looks like for the asset owner, the oil company or the gas company, the energy company, a strong base case, a business case produces very good outcomes. And all of that is predicated on a well-governed reckoning point. That no-go decision at the early phase is extremely important. And all the things I've talked about, the cycle, getting that right, standardization, supplier-led solutions, all impact on that decision-making. And we're seeing more and more of that focus in that very early space. So what does that mean for the cost engineers on the call? I'm quoting here from EY, Ernst Young, that they see that there's a refocus on skills. We talked very much at the beginning there with Aldo about, why Aace matters to me, and it's that constant keeping in touch with what's going on, keeping my skills and sharp, knowing where the resources are to go to get help, and relying on the industry to keep me appraised on what's going on. For corporations like my own, managing human capital, the human resources, is as important as their financial capital. We are what makes the company tick. Aligning those capabilities with our strategic priorities is a major challenge. And as we talked earlier, the switch from renewables, lowering carbon, as the industry pivots towards these new priorities, our skills have to adapt, our workforce has to adapt. The leadership model that we have, having good leadership, is hugely important. Part of Chevron's culture is well known. We call it "We Lead." Everyone in the corporation is seen as a leader in whatever they do. They lead others through the work they do. And then there's a mix of skills. We often focus very much on our academic skills, our hard skills, what we do day in and day out. But our digital skills, as we've seen in some of the slides, are going to become more and more important as we're able to analyze and adapt projects on the fly. It's fairly recent, and it may still be the case for many, where the project controls report is collated at the end of the month. It goes through several management reviews and is issued at the third week of the following month. So it's at best 7 weeks out of date by the time the information gets to the decision makers. From the digital world and real-time decision making, that is going away. If it's already gone away in lots of space. It's like the manufacturing industry. In real time when you've got a problem and you can deal with it. And then the soft skills, coaching, leading, inspiring people, getting the best out of people, is going to be more and more important for cost engineers. And use of internal reskilling as a lever to close the skills gap. My company has lots of programs, and they're less focused on the technical aspects. They're more focused on those soft skills of coaching and of leadership. And that's seen very much how to future-proof the oil services workforce. So in summary, and we'll open up for some Q&A, the project characteristics in the industry, they're changing dramatically. There's a shift in requirement to be competitive, not just predictable. Predictable means you're on time and on cost, but there's ways of doing that. You can pad the cost estimate. You can create buffers in your schedule. if you take those out and can still deliver, then you're starting to move towards being competitive. You've still got to do all the other things. You've still got to deliver quality. You've still got to deliver safely, etc. And you've still got to deliver something that will stand the test of time and operate and maintain for many, many years to come. And there's going to be some refocus on the cost engineering skills as more requirement for digital awareness, more ability to do real-time analysis. I see on LinkedIn a lot of people talking about Power BI and other tools and applications. That's all part of what we're seeing in the industry as we reskill. We've moved from paper to computers, and now it's going to be computers to cloud analytics, and that's what we're seeing in the industry. So that's some of my personal perspective. I'm quite happy to take questions, clarifications, challenges, anything that people have got. And I see Felipe back online. So we got any questions, Felipe?
I've been online all the time. I just wasn't showing up.
Yeah.
Quite fascinating. It was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Martin. And I think there's so many questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to make sure we touch base on at least one of the matters that have been very high demand, I guess, over the last 18 months, which is the COVID, right? So how the COVID situation impacted the industry, impacted your daily work, not only how you work on a daily basis, but also did it impact as well the actual work in what you're doing? Does it change? Because obviously, not only construction, but operations might be changing as well because of it, right? So if you can, there's a bit of
so
sharing
just a little bit on my daily work, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen in the industry. And some of it's good and some of it's not so good, right? So my personal work is very much around this environment, on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, using the technology to collaborate and connect with my co-workers, because physically you're not doing that. And then a lot of tools and development on the data analytics, a lot of work in that space. So we've shifted to become more digital savvy in everything we do, in terms of a lot of our processes, everything from doing electronic timesheet, everything changed, right? And booking our travel, all right, we don't travel at the moment, but all of these support systems throughout the enterprise have changed because of the digital transformation that's going on. Now, the way we look at the digital twins, we've got those. We're now able to access information in real time on just about any asset we've got. We can replicate and duplicate information. Some of our Gulf of Mexico work that people will be hearing about. We've got an asset already under construction. The next one in line is going to look very similar. Whereas in the past we'd start from fresh. In terms of the construction, we've had to slow projects down. We've had to accommodate COVID protocols. A lot of our major projects, rely on a camp situation where workers are on rotation and they're a global workforce, and so huge changes. Non-essential personnel were evacuated and returned home, or returned to a safe place where they work virtually. But it means you plan the work, and so for planners and schedulers, it's almost mañana. You got to plan and everything down to a greater degree of accuracy and certainty. So you're seeing that happening. And I read today, Google is building a new facility in Austin, in Texas, and they're actually going to be ahead of schedule. And part of that is attributed recognizing the supply chain problems, getting all the material up front and staging it and approaching it almost like that manufacturing operational science approach. And I don't know the specifics, but they're going to finish 6 months ahead of schedule. And they've been building that entire facility during this COVID era, as I've heard it called. So there's still opportunities to do things better. There's still a lot of challenges. It's certainly making us rethink the way we do work and how we look at our workers. We do a lot of our projects with modularization. We build them somewhere and then ship them somewhere else for installation. So you can see that being more of a focus as well, and the fact that we can drill rigs in Texas, for instance, the new generation are operated remotely, that digital twin approach. So you're just seeing the whole way we do work changing, and I think all that COVID has done and the pandemic is just sharpen our focus on that. A lot of these changes are coming anyway. They've just been prioritized, or the focus has changed a little. So that's how I see it impacting me. I'm sat in an office at my house. I'll be sat here for another few more weeks, and even then, my job that was 50% travel, it's probably not going to be 50% travel. It's going to be a much smaller amount. How we do our projects, thinking through the pandemic, applying our techniques and technologies to it, it's going to be a prime focus to look after people. It's very important that people who come to work for the company go home every day and safely to their families, and that applies to trips, slips, falls, as well as COVID. So just a greater emphasis on the workforce.
Yeah, awesome. And one other question that I had that I think would be interesting to hear about from you as well had to do with the transformation of the industry itself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, it's an industry that, as you mentioned that, right, in your presentation, there's a lot of focus on carbon and ESG aspects of those, the race for, or the competition for capital. So how is that all affecting, the daily work of a cost engineering professional like yourself in that industry?
So the reason it's affecting us, so 1 hour available capital is significantly less in term, because the oil price was exacerbated by the COVID, the pandemic. There was a collapse in demand, as you know, and so we fund our projects pretty much self-funded, and so you can do less work. So the challenge then is to get the biggest bang for your buck, is the expression. Where's your money best spent? And so a lot of the work is around knowing where you're spending your money, where the opportunity is to reduce those costs, and then managing those costs. In terms of the impact on the workforce, that was significant. Activity stopped. Projects that were already in flight had to be completed, and we're still working on some of those major projects, and they're actually replanned and rebooted to deal with post-COVID and the massive disruption we're seeing in what is our global supply chain. That's a real problem, and it changes as well. Do you just think everything's behind you in Italy and your compressors are going to be on schedule again, or the new schedule, and then something else changes in Europe and that impacts there, or in manufacturing and the car industry? Good luck buying a new car in the US at the moment because they can't get the microchips from wherever. So you got to be more flexible. So there's fewer people doing the work. A lot of people have left the industry, mainly retirement and things like that. So it's going to be a growing skill shortage. And I think that was part of the concluding slides there of, you got to really look after your workforce and manage them and take care of them. And the cost engineers are part of your workforce, and they're a highly valued asset within any company. And there's more need for them now than ever, with scarce capital, trying to improve returns. And then how do you approach all of these new technologies and new industries and new applications? The fundamentals of cost engineering, if you've got a scope and execution and how many tons of steel and then your cost engineer can pivot towards these new industries, and they're rapidly growing industries. And I give the example of the cell phone industry, and the iPhone 20 years ago didn't exist. Now we're looking at renewables and saying, well, what that looked like in 20 years. We're just starting to see it, right? So I think we're in a good spot, but the transformation was significant in the energy industry and can't be underestimated. And I think part of the reason for heavy reliance on digital and technology is the fact we've lost so many experienced workers from the industry.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. And Aldo, if you have any questions, please jump in. I had one more that I know some of the members are always
yes,
interested.
I have one. Martin, we have heard of early involvement of contractors, or contractor early involvement. Is this a reality in the oil and gas sector? This kind of a collaborative contracting?
It is. So I touched on a little bit. I referred to it as supplier-led solutions. So a lot of the suppliers in the industry are now coming with the solution to the energy companies, and we're adopting their solution as opposed to designing something and then asking the supplier to build it. And so their engagement is very, very early. Right before we even pick a concept, we will engage with our suppliers. And so it's very much earlier than that. Historically, we would design something, bid it out, and then award it. And that's when the supplier would be involved. Now, they're involved right at that execution planning and picking the concept and how big will the asset be and how we will build it and where we will build it and who will be the suppliers. So we're seeing more and more of their early involvement.
Yeah, that if I may, so that lead me to the question that I actually have. So it's a good start, because my and when I said to some of the members that I was going to talk to you, Martin, today, they were all.
Felipe, I think we can go to the final remarks and then close the webinar.
Okay, yeah, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Quick question. So the key question was on the contractors and the relationship you guys have had over the COVID era, as you said.
Yes.
Now, how did that increase disputes? Did it not? Did the new technologies helping reduce it? How you're dealing with it? Then we can close it.
Okay. So personally, I'm not aware of more disputes. There's been an intense sort of period of collaboration, trying to work. We're all in this together and trying to work it out. Right now, part of that may be the way we contract. We have a lot of reimbursable type time and material work. We're not on lump sums on a lot of things. But very early in the COVID, a lot of people were enforcing force majeure and things like that. So you had to work with suppliers and vendors and contractors to be able to work out how you're going to complete the work. And part of, like I say, some of our major projects have completely re-baselined and reworked their schedules, have had to address all those points. And, to the point where, yeah, we have a major project out in the, in Tengiz that's well known, and that was over 20,000 workers on that site. And that went down to like, a few hundred, right? And now it's ramped back up to 10,000. It's still only half the workers used to be on the site. So you can imagine you've got to work with your suppliers. You can't just take the contract and say, I've got the contract, I'm going to make it work. And so personally, I'm not seeing a lot of disputes. I certainly read about them, and the industry press seem to be all over the place. But I think it goes back to how you contract and the relationships we have with the contractors. And you typically see in our business long-term relationships, and they tend to endure particularly major setbacks like we've seen in the last 18 months.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it does show, what we were discussing before, right? Lot of effort in planning and long-term vision. That's really good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So thank you very much. As Aldo was saying, we're approaching the end of the conversation. Thank you again so much. Aldo, if you wanna do the closing remarks, please go ahead. I think there's a little bit of a delay between us and Brazil now. We can wait for Aldo's closing.
Okay. I feel like one of them news reporters. I should hold my ear. And Aldo.
Yeah, Zach, I don't know if he's. Looks like he's frozen now.
Okay.
Well, anyways, we can do the closing here. Again, thank you so much, Martin. It was a pleasure. It was very informative and very, very interesting, your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure anybody watching did enjoy that too. Let's keep in touch. As you well said, hopefully next time in person.
That'll be really good.
And we'll take it from there. Thank you so much, everybody who is watching. Enjoy your evenings. Thank you for being with us. And we'll be in touch again next week. Just, quick reminder. So this is an event that happens often once a month. And because of difficulties in agenda, it's going to happen twice this month because we didn't have it last month. So next week we have another one. We'll be soon starting to publish it. Again, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Martin. Enjoy your evenings. Bye-bye.
Ciao.